or when it gets real.
So IFR is very easy. That's what you're trying to tell everybody. Okay.
That is not what I'm saying.
So that's what Meg says about that word. And I've listened to Johnny Cash and listening to Jen Carter Cash last night, and she says, I'm talking with my mouth. And so I just that's more my intellectual level, is parlance. Yeah.
No, Mr. Ballard, the Mr. Beast numbers aren't going to hit themselves. And right now you're making great videos, and you'll be there before you know it.
Yes.
I'm going to change my handle on YouTube to be Mr. Least. Actually, the last couple of videos I did are doing okay. It's kind of weird.
I remember seeing that one was really popping up, which was cool.
But it never fails. It's like if you just do something that you don't ever normally do, like it has no flying in it. It does not show my face one time, and it's all based in Super 8 footage that either I had or that my dad shot, and that's it. And of course, that's like, like I don't know. It's funny.
Here's what I'm noticing. There are some other YouTubers that have a much larger following, and they're starting to emulate Brian Siskin's style of YouTube creation. So it's going to be one of those things where, 6 months from now, Brian is going to blow up. He's going to go from 5,000 subscribers to 250,000 subscribers.
I have 1.6 thousand, and 400 of that happened in the last 28 days or something. Awesome. The channel is like 11 years old. It's so funny. It's
and you've grown by 25% in the last 4 days.
Yeah, when I just phone it in, it's all good. No, it is the one that you're talking about. That person told me that that they thought about tagging me or whatever, and that it was definitely a lean in my direction.
And I would be flattered by it. I don't take it as copying. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right?
I suppose, right?
Just as long as you don't violate the copyright laws, that's all.
What do they say? The best artists steal.
Everything is a remix.
Everything is a remix. Nothing is new. Everything is permitted.
Right.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. What is it like to become a pilot in midlife? The challenges are unique, but so are the rewards. Hosts Ben, Brian, and Ted talk learning to fly, growing as pilots, and the joy of flying to destinations. The purpose of the podcast is not to teach, but to share knowledge and experiences. Okay, checklists are complete. Let's get the show started.
Hello and welcome to episode 106 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. We share all of our experiences. Well, maybe not all of our experiences. We do share our experiences and challenges of flying in midlife. Whether you're a seasoned pilot, training for a rating, or just thinking about getting started in aviation, we like to think of the podcast as your aviation companion and your weekly dose of aviation inspiration. My name is Ben. I'm a pilot with an IFR rating and a commercial certificate based in the metro Atlanta area. I fly a Cessna 182, sometimes referred to as the Beast, who got put through her paces today. Also joining us from Nashville, Tennessee, home of the Bachelorette Super Charlie, flying a Cherokee 180 named Lucy. Good evening, Brian Siskin.
Good evening. It's great to see everybody in the chat. Good to see you guys. And I look forward to hearing about your day today. And I had a little bit of an interesting day too, but yours more interesting. So yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome. Also joining us from the West Coast in the village of Portlandia, flying a flight design CTLS, our sport pilot extraordinaire, Ted. Hello, Ted.
Hey there. Glad to be here. Not glad to be the one who isn't flying in this group, but still glad to be here.
Well, we all go through our phases of not flying.
Exactly.
We've got your back. Today, we're going to be talking about multi-day trips, planning, all the things that go with it. And it should be a fun episode. Today, I had quite the adventure. I actually had what I would refer to as a multi-day trip packed into one day. At least that's what it felt like. With regards to events and announcements, we're comfortable in saying we are getting close to a destination for the spring fly-in. We have some vetting to do and make sure that all their I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have an announcement so everybody can start marking their calendars.
That's going to be awesome.
I'm pretty pumped about it.
If this works out the way that I think it's going to work out, I think it will be the biggest, best that we've had.
I agree. And like our good friend in the chat, Alyssa says, there's a concept of a plan for the fly-in.
That's right.
We're about 13% there, Alyssa. So, but yeah, it's a part of the country I haven't spent hardly any time in, so I'm pretty pumped about it.
You haven't been to Texas a lot?
Oh, I've been to
did I just say Texas? Oh,
wait, we're going to Texas. Allegedly, possibly.
Allegedly.
It's
if things work out.
Okay, I kind of messed that up, but I will say that is the front runner right now.
It is the front
that is
runner.
the state that contains the front runner.
That is the state, and it's a big state, by the way, maybe the largest.
Yeah, I mean it's so big that it's like even if you're in Wisconsin, it's probably just an hour.
That's right. That's right. Mr. Siskin, why don't you help us out with the housekeeping tonight?
Yeah, let's do it. We are grateful for all of you making this the best pilot community that we know of. A positive space where we share everything. It is a positive space, by the way. It's not just, we're not just saying that. I can't tell you how many times I'm in Discord and just see compounding good conversations that are helping people. But anyway, it's a positive space where we share everything from training experiences, personal minimums, tackle ownership challenges, review flight plans, and best of all, make new aviation friends. Connect with us. You can join our Patreon community from $1 a month. That's 25 cents per episode. That is one gumball. Access exclusive content and the Discord community. 10% of our Patreon supports Freedom Aviation Network's anti-human trafficking efforts, and we send that out every month as our Patreon continues to grow. And it feels really good to do that. Whenever I see the receipts going out, and it's like that just feels good because the more that we're doing, the more that we're able to help them, and the more they're able to help people. And then we'll talk more about that your experience today. But watch us live on YouTube's Mondays, 8 p.m. Easterns. I'm just going to make everything plural now. Share your stories at midlifepodcast@gmail.com. midlifepilotpodcast@gmail.com. We read every message. Ben hides every message, and you might hear yourself on the show.
Despite my best efforts.
I'm just going to keep harping on that because every week it's like, wait, what? Who? What?
I would like noted for the record that it occurred to me after the fact that the one that I did put into the folder was one that we had already taken care of, and it was justifiably in the right folder.
Okay, so you're saying that you're absolved of any wrongdoing
of that one specific email, not the others, but just that one.
All right,
this is the sausage getting made. Yes,
that's right. So you might hear yourself on the show. Send us all those things, and for everything Midlife Pilot Podcast, community feedback, merch, dad hats, and more, visit midlifepilotpodcast.com. Can't thank everybody enough. It's been we haven't. I guess we'll do some sort of a year in review thing, but man, what a year it's been, and to see how all the sort of things are percolating. And Patreon and the community and everything. It's just been awesome.
It really has. Ted, why don't you tell us about our new supporters for the week?
Yeah, I'd love to. So we have 2 new supporters this week. At the Landomatic level, we have Bob W. At the Hershey Bar level, we have Bradley I. We're going to talk about Bradley in a minute here. And speaking of Discord, I wrote down a couple of things that I noticed this week. The first, I'm going to ask as a question when I'm done with this, and that is, aside from training, have you used an E6B? No fair saying, I just did my instrument work and I used it then. Do you use it in regular flying? Been a lot of conversation about looking at planes, buying a plane, and the logistics of going to get a plane. And we also have a member that won a 140, a Cessna 140 in an auction, and he flew it partway home over the last week. And it was cool to see that show up in the Creeper bot and go check in and see how far he made.
Did you notice how green Brian turned as soon as you said the raffle 140?
Look, I love it. I love it. I mean, I'm not even in a spot where if somebody gave me, I can't even afford a 140 that somebody gives me. You know what I mean? Like I'm maxed out in the situation that I'm in, which is good. You know, I'm grateful for it. Yeah. But that's the thing. Like, I don't know. I just like knowing I just imagine what a life-changing, awesome thing that is, you know, and how great it is. It's like, it's just such a cool plane. And then you can go get in, fly it back, you know, on a mega trip. It's like, gotta be the best feeling.
It would be. And to answer your other question, I have an electronic E6B. I got an app for the phone, and I do use like 3 functions on a semi-regular basis. Conversion from Celsius to Fahrenheit. I don't know why, but I just like to know how hot it is in the summer. The second thing, I do use the crosswind component for when I'm getting ready to land. And then the third one is it's the distance you put in the winds and time to destination, basically. I know that I have it on there, but when I'm planning different routes, I sometimes use that.
Interesting. So, I don't use it at all. There was some talk in Discord about using it to do your descent planning, and I have 2 different ways that I do that. The first is in ForeFlight, and in some of the electronics I've got, it'll tell you what descent you need to have from now until your destination, so you can wait till it hits 300 or 500 and start your descent. And the other way is I just guess and get it wrong, and it doesn't matter. So that's my lack of using it. How about yourself, Brian?
Well, as a person who's pretending to have an instrument rating, I think it's it's important to be able to do those things well. I definitely use descent to destination in ForeFlight. It's in my fixed little ribbon of things on the far left. On the far right, I have nearest airport, and then on the far left, I have descent to destination. So that's pretty much what I do. But there's, you know, all these formulas that different people's instructors have told them, and they're all good.
So Douglas in the chat says same iPhone app for crosswind, and I just wanted to add to that. There's some days that I have a hard enough time choosing which runway will be a headwind and a tailwind when it's mostly a crosswind. Which one's going to be more favorable when it's pretty close to being, you know, a direct crosswind. And so that's kind of where I use it the most, is when there's that big crosswind. The app really does help a lot.
For that, I don't, my brain does it somehow. Of all the things that I can't do with my brain can do crosswind calculations. They don't have to be so exact. I mean, you're going to feel it out anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Agreed.
But it's like, but to get a real sense of what it actually is, if you really want to, and how, you know, it's like, well, if, I'm just trying to figure out if it's direct or not totally direct.
All right.
You
So
know, but I give a lot of leeway for something to be direct. It's not just, you know, exactly perpendicular. Pretty much anything in the range is going to be more or less direct. And then, so it's like, how direct is it? All right. You know, and then I just kind of rough out that stuff. And then,
all right, quick quiz.
Yeah.
The wind is coming from 160. from the southeast. 2.5 or 7.
Which runway are you going to land on?
Yeah. And what's going to be my crosswind component? Well, you don't have to say that because
wait,
I'll give you wind speed. But
I'm sorry, the runway is 160?
No, the wind is 160.
The wind is 16.
Runway 257.
It's a direct crosswind.
The wind is 160. Yeah, that would be 90 degrees off.
Right. Yeah. That's why I use the app, because when it's right there on that direct crosswind, it doesn't really matter which runway you're on. But in my brain cannot reconcile, okay, this one's going to have a slight tailwind and this one's going to have a slight headwind, but not in this case because it's 160, it's direct 90. So anyway,
the funny thing for me is that I used to calculate crosswinds because I was really nervous about them and I really wanted to know what I was getting into. And then now I get excited. It's like the more crosswind, the better I get excited.
Yeah. Well, Alpha Echo Golf and some others mentioned that ForeFlight gives you those crosswind components, and I really appreciate that because it's one more way that I can be dumb and let the electronics handle my life, which is, here's the preferred runway. Here's how much headwind and how much crosswind components they have. You don't have to sit there and count on your fingers like I just did to figure out the 90.
So if anybody doesn't know that in ForeFlight, please go look it up. But basically, if you go look at the runways, it will tell you exactly what is going on. And a lot of people, for whatever reason, don't use the procedure function as VFR pilots, and I don't know why. Use the procedure function. It is the greatest thing in the world. And then when you lie to HEC and say that you've got the field in sight, you at least have some sort of assurance that you can still not overfly the field accidentally.
Yes.
Well, let's keep it moving. Brian, why don't you take that first feedback that we got?
Yes. So
the review.
Yeah, as you guys know, we've been trying to get we've sort of keep forgetting to mention that we would really like to get reviews on iTunes and places. So thank you guys for starting to do that again. And so we have a new 5-star review from El Aviador Ruiz the Aviator. Midlifer who can connect with everything they talk about. He says, I didn't think a podcast specific to an age group of pilots would make much sense.
Neither did we.
I wish that was the end of the review.
Yes.
5 stars. I didn't think this would make any sense.
Yes.
But all of these topics are so relevant to a pilot like me at this stage of life. Love them. So that's great.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We got some feedback from Brad, who we mentioned as a new Hershey Bar member of our Patreon group. And reading from his feedback, G'day from the real Deep South. And I think he really means Australia. That doesn't get very much further south than that, outside of Antarctica. But finally caught up after binge listening to all 105 podcast episodes at 1.5 speed.
Whoa.
Even then, Brian and Ben sound like they are talking too slowly.
But not Ted.
Shots fired, but he's not wrong. He continues, I don't have any new accolades to shower you all with, apart from highlighting that 99% of your content is truly applicable to midlife aviators across the globe, as it speaks to universal truths common to us all. As such, I was happy to become a first-time Patreon supporter, even if you guys have your seasons completely mixed up in the Northern Hemisphere. Cheers from a 50-hour C-152, a Cessna 152 newbie. He is writing to us from Jandakot Airport down in Perth, Australia.
Yankee Papa Juliet Tango.
Really cool.
Some quick numbers. About a third of the land mass of the world is below the equator, and about 10% of the population of the world is below the equator. So it's nice to have an Australian joining us. It's great.
Yeah. So about this whole slow thing.
Yeah.
Still slow at 1.5x. Okay, so we're gonna have to start doing like the FedEx commercial guy.
Micro machines. Yeah.
Noted for the record that I don't have a 1.5 mode. This is it. And I just, especially tonight, don't have the bandwidth to talk much faster. So you get what you get. It's my story.
Yeah.
I'm sticking to it.
So speaking of not having much bandwidth, you had a multi-day trip today.
Yeah, in one day. So we are talking about multi-day trips and how to plan for them. Some of the topics that we want to cover are weather and route planning, aircraft storage and security, managing schedule changes, logistics and services, things of that nature. And Brian was kind enough to present us with a outline of what we really kind of wanted to hit on. And as I'm reading it, everything that he listed there happened to me today. I felt very proud and privileged to be able to do a Freedom Aviation flight today. I had to fly to Lawrenceville, LZU, our friend Nathan Ballard's, one of his home airports. We picked up the Advocate that flies with this person, the VIP, and then flew up to Olive Branch, which is just outside of Memphis. And then I was to bring them back to Lawrenceville, and then I'd come home. This is one of the few times when I was briefing the weather last night, I'm thinking this could very well be a no-go. And the graphical analysis forecast was saying that it was going to be low IFR in the metro Atlanta area all day. So I let the parties know, the Freedom Aviation Network team know that, hey, I'm going to do an assessment in the morning and we'll make a decision then. And got up at 6 o'clock this morning, which happened to be the TAF from last night, from midnight, around midnight last night. And it was forecasting IFR from 11 o'clock this morning till 5 o'clock this afternoon. And I am perfectly comfortable flying in an IFR weather. And I knew en route there was going to be a lot of IFR time, a lot of actual IMC time, I should say. I knew that it was going to take a really long time to get up there. We had 60 knot headwinds. It took 3 hours and 15 minutes. Here's when I knew it was bad, and I didn't say this to you either. So I'm flying into Lawrenceville to pick up the Advocate, right? And I'm in essence on a downwind for LZU. And I'm doing 165 knots over the ground. And when I looked at my EFB in Garmin Pilot, it said that my ETA to land at the airport while I'm on downwind was at 8:21. And then I go and I had to do a procedure turn, which I'm always happy to get those in when you have to shoot an approach because you need holds to maintain your currency. I did the procedure turn, and when I got established inbound, my new ETA was 8:50. It grew 30 minutes by the time I got on the final. I was on final, and it added 30 minutes. I was doing about 45 miles an hour over the ground coming in. So I knew it was going to be salmon swimming upriver, getting up to Memphis. And we did. And I checked the weather again. I fueled up because we burned probably 55 gallons getting up there. And checked the weather. And again, the TAF showed IFR, ceilings 500 to 800, which I am comfortable with. So we get in the plane, we take off. And of course, we have a beautiful, lovely tailwind now. We were doing 175 knots over the ground.
Nice.
At 9,000 feet. It was an hour and 40 minutes. So it went from 3:15 to hour 40, which there was a downside to that because as soon as we got up and into range, I looked and the overlay of the weather conditions for all the airports, everything in the metro area was showing low IFR. So fortunately, the Advocate got her PPL back in February. Shout out to Stacy. Congratulations to her. So she knows her way around the cockpit. And I said, okay, here's our deal. And what we're going to do is when we get on with Atlanta TradeCon, we're going to see if anybody's getting into Lawrenceville, because the ceilings are at 200 feet and the minimums are at 200 feet. And there was 3/4 mile visibility, and I believe that approach requires a half-mile visibility. So the visibility was there, but the ceilings were the concern. And as soon as we got on, they said, we've had one plane try to get into Lawrenceville and they went missed. So prior to that, I got a little bit ahead of myself. I said, there's 2 airports that are IFR or marginal VFR. One was Fulton County, which would be having to drive across town, which anybody that lives in this area knows that's never fun, trying to get through Atlanta during rush hour on a rainy day. Athens was the next one, and it was marginal, and I felt very comfortable. The ceilings were 1,200, so I knew I could get into there, and it was closer to our final destination, and so that worked out really well. We got down, and turns out they have a Hertz rental counter. We were able to get a car, and my co-pilot, the advocate, was able to look all this up on our EFB. They had a Hertz counter there. So we're doing all this planning on the fly because we're having to divert. But I had to work out what the airport was going to do with the airplane while I'm not there. We had to work out schedule changes to get people where they needed to be. People needed to eat. A lot of this was happening on the fly all at the same time, especially the weather routing.
Yeah.
It was pretty intense. So I think I flew 6.7 hours today.
Oh, wow.
And I think I've made notes on my knee pad, but I think I have a solid 4 hours of IMC today, which may be the most in one time.
Do you feel like that your skills as you were going through the day, like was it getting easier, or was it just starting to wear you thin?
That's a great question. And I'd say a little bit of both. What I've learned is I should say all 3 airports that I flew in had ILSs, but also had RNAV on the same runways. And the minimums were the same for both the ILS and the RNAV, which is becoming more and more common, it seems to me. I'm not a CFI. I don't work for the FAA. I don't know that for sure. But to me, it seems that the minimums for RNAVs are becoming the same. And my automation in my airplane, my autopilot flies an RNAV a lot better than it does an ILS. So I had decided I'm going to fly, ATC would come on, expect the ILS 27. And I would say, can we get the RNAV? He goes, you can expect that. And it worked out perfectly. My workload was significantly reduced. Managing speed and altitude is all I have to do at that point in time. And when you know your numbers, your power settings, managing speed is really not that hard. It's just keeping the needles aligned. And so I do feel like I leveled up in my preparation for each of these approaches. And I felt like today I really did think through everything that I needed to think through to accomplish the mission. And in the past, whether it was an angel flight or for whatever it was, there's always one stone you didn't uncover that, oh, I should have done that. Or I could have, just doing a self-evaluation after the fact, you think about, well, I could have done this different. And the 2-hour drive back, I had a lot of time to think about this. And I'm not really sure that I would have done anything different. I think I was really happy with the way I managed the situation.
Now, you said it's 2 hours from where you left the plane to your house?
Yes.
And are you leaving the plane overnight?
I am leaving it over 2 nights. And I, again, had the forethought to look at the weather tomorrow when I was doing the car rental reservation. And I saw that it was going to be low IFR for most of the day tomorrow. Plus, I have work to catch up on after being out today. So I told him I'm going to have the car till Wednesday. And I talked to the FBO. I said, I asked what the price for the hangar space was, and it was pretty ridiculous because they had a TBM and a Citation and two other planes that had also diverted to Athens trying to get into Lawrenceville, who they could get a lot more money for putting their airplanes in. So they were going to, so I ended up leaving it outside. They were going to put it on a tie down for me.
Yeah.
So that is loaded with a lot of sort of micro examples of what we want to get through here.
Which is kind of why I wanted to tee it up that way. So let's go
so good.
it.
So we've kind of broken this down into several categories, and we're just going to go through it. And each of us are going to have our own outlook and our own ways of looking at it, and you will too. It's one of those things where a lot of this stuff really just comes from experience. And I know that there's a lot of newer pilots where you just haven't had a chance to really take a lot of big trips yet. What I hope that we get out of this is that by sharing some of these things, it just maybe helps some people that are a little hesitant to take multi-day trips, gives maybe a little bit more inspiration, or just, I don't know. These are all things that we've all had to work through to be able to do that ourselves. So from a category standpoint, the things that we want to cover are, and here's the thing, we've talked about long cross-country planning. We are not here to do another long cross-country planning thing, but in the confines of a multi-day trip, there's a lot of just dependencies and ways that things start to bump up against each other. And some of that will overlap with cross-country planning, but it's always conceptually, I think, in this episode to be thought about within that sort of interrelated day-to-day, overnight kind of scenario. So the things we're going to talk about are weather and route planning, not necessarily, again, for cross-country planning, but, what are the considerations relative to what we're going to be talking about? Aircraft storage and security. Ben, you're talking about, leaving your plane for a couple days. I've got questions, especially with the weather coming in. Managing schedule changes, which obviously, Ben, you talked about. Logistics and services, area or regional or terrain challenges along the way, and just other challenges along extended trips. So getting first into just the weather and the route planning, I definitely cheat when I do this part of the multi-day trip. I don't plan. I generally hope that something's going to happen during the time that I've planned for it. But honestly, what I'm doing is I'm hedging my bets against high pressure systems, and I'm looking at broad swaths of good weather. And then as I start to get a sense about 5 days out about generally what the patterns are, I'm giving myself a much greater chance of success by changing my aim to those just larger swaths of good weather. So I think that if you know you're going to be out for a while on a trip, don't make it harder on yourself by being so already frozen on, I've got to do it this weekend, or I've got to do it. I mean, of course, that may work out just fine. But I'm talking about, I guess when we're talking about multi-day trips, I'm not even really talking about a weekend. I'm talking about going somewhere for 3 or 4 or 5 days or something, and going to multiple locations. So you have to look at that along the way. And I will say that for me, Windy has been a really great app for quickly getting a sense of what's going to be going on in multiple locations. And when you pay for it, you get the 10-day forecasts and all that. And I got to say, they are remarkably good. And if you use I use the HRRR model and the Mediagram, and it will show you pretty much what's going to happen. I mean, I find it to be incredibly reliable.
I used it last night.
Yeah. And was it not accurate? I mean, it's pretty accurate.
I had conflicting information from the graphical analysis chart that I used to love, and I emphasize used to love.
Yeah.
Versus the TAF. They were completely different. Well, they weren't completely different. One was low IFR, the other was IFR to marginal VFR. And Windy had it right.
Yes. Well,
And I will say, take some time. Windy is a great app, but you need to really get to learn to use it. It's not super intuitive,
there is
especially the
that.
Mediagram. So spend some time now or whatever, but get to know the app because it can be a very good tool.
Yeah, and just as a side note, we are not weather experts. We are not CFIs, and if you want to know everything about weather, go check out Erica's channel,
Aerosafe.
Aerosafe on YouTube, and she will walk you through weather in a way that will open your mind and enlighten you. So there's a lot of different apps. There's a lot of different weather source things, you know, but just in general, when you're doing that long range planning, that's just one of the tools that has been really good for me. And I think that you have to be thinking about also when you're going on these longer trips that there's going to be unique situations. And some of this kind of gets into sort of the regional and terrain challenge kind of category along with weather. But if you know that you're going to be going over some mountains, you need to have your head around that. You need to be, you know, it'd be great for you to have experience. And I'm not talking about like the Sierra Nevadas. I'm talking about just like the Appalachians or whatever. You need to know, you know, go over a flight plan with the CFI if you have to, if you don't have that experience. But I think about what are the winds aloft going to be. I have minimums for how closely I'll get to a ridge. You cross ridges at a 45, you know, there's just a lot of details to that. But when it comes to regional and terrain challenges, you got to just make sure you're looking, you know, for all of those anomalous things that will come up with longer range trips, and be prepared to have a totally different set of kind of behaviors of weather based on where you are now. But at the same time, one of the great things about the multi-day trip is that you're experiencing it as you go, and you're starting to be able to read a continuum, and you start to form a longer different. You have this observation over a longer span of what has been all the reported weather, and then within that safe confine, what has it actually been? And if you find yourself in a place where it's always a little worse, you know, it seems to be tending to be always a little worse than forecasted, then you can start to pay attention to those trends. Or if you start to see that, wow, these are really pessimistic compared to what I'm seeing, then, you know, you can kind of watch that.
One quick example of that, when you talk about flying in mountains, if I'm flying through South Georgia and there's a ceiling of 7,000 feet, I could care less about that flying VFR. But if it's a ceiling of 7,000 feet and you're over the heart of the Appalachians, I am not flying that VFR, because there are some peaks that get up into the 6,500 to 7,000 foot range, and yeah, you could possibly get around them, but you may not be able to. It opens up a whole new set of risks for you. So I agree with you that the terrain or the regional variations, you have to change your mode of thinking.
I think that when it comes to weather and route, that we always talk about you don't have to fly, and on these longer trips, there's a lot of spinning those two variables around. What if I change the route? What if I change my timing for the weather? And if you start a trip and you must fly exactly this route, you're going to need to be a little bit more flexible on your time. If you can adjust your route to avoid or mitigate some weather, then you have a little bit more choice on keeping your original schedule, but changing your route. And
I
that's what
remember,
I found
Brian,
is,
I can't remember if it was a text or what, but you said, it's back when you were renting, and I think it may have been your first trip to Marfa, but I remember you said, I've got these days off and I'm going to point the plane in the direction where there's good weather.
Yeah.
You didn't have the destination in mind. You had the weather. You wherever the good weather was, that's where you were going.
Yeah.
And I love that idea because it adds some spontaneity, and you're going to discover things that you never would have dreamed of discovering.
You know, I find that, I mean, obviously I'm a little bit of an adventurer, I suppose, in that way. And I don't mind flying by myself and just getting weird, you know, in the world and seeing what happens. But it is so freeing to do that. If you're finding yourself limited by planning and all that, then maybe just take a step back and just think about what are you really trying to achieve? If you just want to get the experience, then yeah, just chase the tailwinds and the good weather, and you'll always be in a pretty good spot. So yeah. So now getting to these places, when you arrive, there's so many different considerations, and I'll just tell you really quickly some of the things that I've experienced with respect to aircraft storage and the securing of the plane and all of that. And it is when you've got enough going on about all the planning, and maybe you're going to see and you're going to visit with people there, or different people along each leg, or whatever it's going to be, in these little overnights you're doing progressively. The last thing you want to be doing is in the back of your mind worrying about your plane sitting on the ramp getting exposed to something that it shouldn't, or something that might make it unsafe, or I don't know. You just don't want to be worried about the plane if you can help it. And so you've got to not only think about the weather for your flight, you've got to think about the weather for what are the winds doing overnight in this place. There's a lot of places where it's like every night the wind kicks up to 30 knots or something or whatever. So you have to be thinking about those things. I will say that for me, I feel like I've experienced a lot of these different things. Again, I try to utilize deltas because they have people and stuff and resources when I'm on long trips if I can. And this is a huge reason why I flew once. And it was only an hour and a half or something, but I flew to Knoxville, Tennessee to go to a really weird music festival. And so it wasn't a multi-day trip in the sense that I was, going on and on and on to the next place, but I was going somewhere, landing, parking the plane for 3 nights, and then getting back in the plane and coming back. And there was a storm that was coming through that I was seeing actually on Windy. The day before, I just thought, well, in a couple of days, that airport is going to get creamed by a massive thunderstorm that's predicting to be 40, 50, 60 knot winds. And I'm already looking at that. It's one thing to be making a no-go decision based on the flight. I'm actually sitting there thinking about making a no-go decision on the plane's got to sit in this place, and will it survive or will it be damaged? And what I did was I resolved myself to say, my no-go decision is going to be, can I get a hangar or not? And I'm not going to bank on it. I am not going to plan for it. I am not going I need to have a human being on a phone tell me, yes, you definitely, for sure, not based on when I get there, but like we've got a spot for you. And I called them early in the morning before I even left, and I talked to somebody and I was assured that I had a spot in the community hangar. Then I was free. Okay, great. I'll go. The weather was going to be awesome, except for just that stage of the time that I was there. And when I was at this event, and staying in downtown and the hotel and everything, and just seeing the violence of the storm come through, and just going, just the peace of mind. Thank goodness that I had the foresight to make sure that plane was already in a hangar, and I confirmed it, and all of that. So yeah, there's a lot of considerations ahead of the trip that you need to make about storage and security. And Ted, you've got something, or no, Ben.
Yeah. Alyssa, again, in our comments, and this is another tactic that you can take. Alyssa comments, last year, plane parked at Romeo Delta uniform, tropical storm coming in. Can you put me in a hangar? She asked. No, but we can triple chalk your plane. And her response, okay, I think I'm leaving early.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what I would have done. The only thing that I would add to that is, and to your point, Brian, and we'll move on maybe after this, is the FBOs. I agree with you on the Charlie and the Deltas. If you're going somewhere for multi-day, call up and ask. Sometimes they're going to charge you $25 a night or $10 a night, and which is great. That's fine for me. $250 a night, maybe not so much. I've had different experiences at the same airport, at the same FBO. And it depends on availability. Look, I'm not knocking the fact that they're trying to make money, but I was in Savannah and I had to leave the plane down there, and they charged me $10 a night. And I've been there before where they wanted $150 a night.
Yeah.
That's fine, but you gotta feel it out.
I'm really picky about making sure that I do the tie downs myself when I'm at smaller airports, especially if I'm worried about the weather. And my plane doesn't have a rear tie down hook. It's a weird thing about the eggs, and so it has this belt that you put around it. And one time I was flying it literally just across town for service, and I'd left that out because I unpacked the plane for the annual. And so once I got home, I drove across town to get the tie down strap, drove to the other side of town to put it on, to drive back home, and that was about 3 hours worth of driving, just for a tail tie down strap. And I guess that's an example for me of how important it is. Make sure you've got whatever it is that's required for those multi-day trips. I would have felt really distracted if I had gone on a multi-day trip and I couldn't tie down the tail of the plane.
Definitely.
Yeah, you want to have fun. The whole point is that you're going to enjoy yourself.
Yes.
And then
For
you're not going
non-airplane
to enjoy
things.
yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I was also just going to say that, when it comes to, everybody's got their own style. Look, I mean, we're not all the same, but I will say that what I have learned is I don't book anything. I mean, I guess if there's an assurance, or you've got a plan with a particular hotel where you're a whatever rewards person and they don't care if you cancel stuff or whatever, but when you get into it's bad enough when you're just doing an overnight to have that pressure of I have reservations. When you're booking a 4 or 5 day trip that's going to be multiple destinations along the way and or all these things, when those things are interlocked and now interdependent on timing and schedule.
Yes.
I understand we are pilots and we are planners and we are people that want to have everything thought about and worked out and checklists and whatever. But I would always advise against that because unless you have a way of doing it without being hurt, because you do not want to be in a position where that is changing your decision making at all.
Let's chat about managing schedule changes. This is another thing that I experienced today, in that with respect to the weather, leaving really early, leaving later, looking at different times of the day, but also knowing that people have to make connections or have to get to certain spots at a certain time.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that you need to consider in your overall planning.
Well, let me add on to that. I asked around on Discord about people's experiences, and my friend Zeb learned to fly, and his kind of number one goal was to do long cross countries, and by that I mean flying halfway across the country, type real cross countries. And so he started doing that not long after getting his ticket and getting comfortable with that. And one of the things that stood out there and was a good reminder was, you always wish you had left earlier in the day. And it's really easy when you have passengers, when you're packing things, all of that, to end up leaving later in the day, which means you're leaving at higher density altitudes. There's more turbulence. And man, just making sure that you leave right at dawn, that can make a huge difference on your flight and on starting your trip rather than leaving at 2 p.m. And that holds true when you're coming back from a large trip and things like that. So it's not just I have a day worth of flexibility, but it's also I am committed to getting up early so I can do dawn patrol.
Totally. When I the last trip to Marfa that I took, I stopped in McKinney and was visiting with a friend. I landed there, visited with a friend there that evening, crashed at the hotel, and she wanted to fly. She was like, I want to go for a ride with you. And she was basically saying, like, either we can do it after you get here, or I said, why don't we do it early in the morning at sunrise? Can you do that? Can you get up that early? She's like, yeah. I said, okay, because I wanted myself to be as fresh as possible. I didn't want to give her a quick ride in the plane after I've been flying all day. And also it served, it was kind of a ninja move, because then I was like, great. So if you just pick me up at my hotel. So I got a ride, and then we went for a flight, and it was great because what it allowed me to do was to I had a lot of the flying that I had to do that day was going from the Dallas Fort Worth area to San Angelo, and then San Angelo to Marfa. So basically things were just going to get more and more remote.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, I really want to take the plane up and kind of just make sure everything's good, before I start to head out in this more remote direction. So it worked out on all accounts.
Yeah. There's another part of that. Not only living early in the day, that also prevents you from arriving late. I know this is a very obvious thing. This is very icing on the vegetables. But if you leave early, you don't arrive late.
Yeah.
And the importance of that is, are you night current? And that was one of the things that Zeb also mentioned. If you've got a passenger with you, or even if you're alone, were you prepared to land after dark in a place you've probably never been before? Do you have your currency, let alone the risk of that? So that's another thing to think through. And boy, you should definitely be current, whether you're planning on using it or not, when you're doing it, these size of trips.
Oh yeah, and quick reminder, check FBO hours. It's crazy.
I've seen several YouTube videos where they didn't do that, and they get to the airport and they're jumping fences. I want to hit on Jason Peavy's comment, and I've said this on the podcast before. His comment is, flying from Texas to Florida in the summer, I like to leave super early in the morning. And to that I say, if you're anywhere in the Southeast in the summer, you kind of need to be at your destination by noon or 1 o'clock, because there's going to be a really good chance you're going to be avoiding pop-up thunderstorms, all over throughout the Southeast.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that you want to take into consideration.
And carry cash.
Well, even more to the point, and I use this, I was talking to my co-pilot this evening in the plane. I said, what is the most important piece of safety equipment you carry on an airplane?
Yeah.
And she started guessing. Is it your iPad? Is it your autopilot? And I said, no, it's a credit card.
That's right.
It is the most important one.
I may be able to top that, though, because I do think it's kind of hard to beat a parachute. So having a caps type system, I think that beats a credit card. But go ahead.
When the first time I went to Marfa, I was very unfamiliar. It's an airport in the middle of nowhere. When I got there, not a soul was anywhere. I mean, there wasn't a human. It was like I landed in the middle of a Western movie that with like an abandoned set, and nobody had been there for 50 years, Yeah. And there's no there was tie downs. I guess they have some ropes in this little house or something, but anyway, I couldn't tell where I should put the plane exactly, where it would be surely not in the way for what else might happen around here. I was unfamiliar. I actually paid the call out for the one guy who runs that airport or whatever, paid $50 or whatever for him just to have him come by. Is this cool? Is this like, okay? And I borrowed those ropes in here, and that's cool, and everything's tied down. Is this in the right place? All right, here's me. Here's my face. Like, just because I was in such a remote place that I paid the call out fee or whatever you want to call it, just to sort of grease the skids of any help that I might need. So carry cash for any number of things. Yeah,
definitely. A couple of other challenges.
It's very much the opposite of flying into a Delta, where you've got some confidence that there's people there, even if it's just daylight hours, that there's someone there. Where you go to somewhere like Marfa, where it's like, maybe there's somebody here once a month to check in and make sure the runway still exists, and that's all you can rely on. So yeah.
A couple other things that I wanted to bring up, regional and terrain challenges wise, time zone management. That's something that I think a lot of people overlook, and it's easy to do, especially during daylight savings time, and you go to Arizona where they don't do it, and you can. I have put myself an hour late for not planning properly, and that's happened more than once. It's just something that you definitely need to keep in mind.
One final thing I just want to say real quick, because I know we're running short here, is just to say, I feel that what I've learned from taking these long multi-day trips is that they are a bit of a gradient of these experiences, and you are used to the patterns of the way that you do things. You're used to, I call this FBO, or I do these things, or I do my fuel planning this way. I don't know. You just have like the way that you're used to doing things. But when you start to really stretch out, here's a great example, real quick. I don't do VFR flight plans. I don't. I do flight following always, but I never do a VFR flight plan. Almost never. But where I do them is when I get far out. When I get to a place where wherever I land, I hope that they find me. Those kind of places out in West Texas in the desert. And so you have to shapeshift your mindset leg at a time about where you're going and what are the implications. You can't just, because if you're coming from a metropolitan area and you're just used to having a bunch of options and I don't know, I'll just, wing it. And then you start to get into a more remote area. You've really got to categorically rethink a lot of times what you're doing. But the main thing I just want, there's been so many great things in the chat here. I want people to please put all these things in the Discord. There's so much good stuff here. Let's try to bang through some of this, Ted.
Yeah, sorry. I was just looking over the side because somebody mentioned something on Discord today that I was trying to find. But it's an example of, you head to an airport. Are you sure that they actually do have fuel? Did you,
right?
Whether you called them or not, somebody had talked about diverting, and they were diverting to a second airport, and ATC told them that airport doesn't have fuel today. So that's it gets so complicated when you start thinking through this. I'm not going to call not only my primary airports, but my divert airports for something like that. But that's a way that you can really kind of hang yourself out if you're not careful with it. So yeah, there's definitely issues with that, and the time zone issue this time of year especially is a big issue because there is only so much daylight. It's really easy to forget that you're going to lose time going whichever direction.
You don't even get daylight anymore, do you?
No, we don't. Yeah, we're due to start getting daylight again in April, so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Very good.
But there's been talk in the comments here tonight. The very common thing is buy a refundable ticket, airline ticket, so that you have an option. On my more recent trip where a company had bought it, I didn't cancel it until I was literally in the air. I didn't trust the weather and everything to go right, and so I canceled it with about 8 hours before the flight, and I literally was en route before I did. So those things are important if you've got making sure that you've got your backups, I guess.
Very good. Well, to recap, I'd like to ask our audience, either live stream or the audio, tell us some of your tips or your tricks of doing long multi-day planning. Some maybe touch on some things we haven't covered tonight. And, there's a lot that goes into it. And as Brian mentioned earlier, a lot of this stuff comes to you from experience. And sometimes you have to make these mistakes to kind of figure out what to do right the next time. So let us know what you've learned over your pilot journey, and
let us know where you go.
tell us where you go. Yeah, give us some destinations too. That's a good point. So, and for tonight's bit of wisdom is common sense is not so common. Sometimes, it is what it is. Subscribe to our audio podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get hear from us, or wherever you get your podcasts. We are broadcasting on Monday nights on YouTube at Midlife Pilot Podcast. It's at Midlife Pilot Podcast, youtube.com/at Midlife Pilot Podcast. Don't forget to visit our website. Leave us a note. Gentlemen, what am I leaving out? Anything else?
What do you want for Christmas, Ben?
Well, not to embarrass you, but we do celebrate Hanukkah in this house. And I have requested an OB, their new coffee mugs. That is
all right.
Primary, and then a new flight bag. I want a backpack style. I need more room.
I'll tell you what, we could almost do a whole thing on flight bags, but I'm telling you, I just use a regular old backpack, and I've been through all the other things, and I just use a backpack, and it's awesome. So it's not made by anybody cool. It doesn't look cool, but it's red so that if I leave it somewhere, it's bright. If I leave it on asphalt, I can see it. You know what I mean? But I hope that you get from your Santa,
Hanukkah Harry.
Hanukkah.
Leave his presents under the Hanukkah bush.
Yes.
What about you guys? What are the Santa Claus wishes if you celebrate Christmas?
I've got nothing. A little bit of
I
weather.
I just
plane working. Yeah.
You know what? All I want for Christmas is for things in my life to not require maintenance for 1 week.
Exactly.
That's asking a lot. I mean, come on.
Between the cars,
1969 airplane, 1985 cars. I mean,
and
really asking a lot here.
Yeah, the problem now is we got a 94 Volvo that needs about the same, like when the car needs as much work as what it's worth. It's like, how much do you love it?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So anyway, no more maintenance. Maintenance-free month. That's what I want.
Let's go for it. All right. Well, wrapping up episode 106 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. Thank you, everybody, for joining in the chat. Good night, everybody.